But what I really found, Otis and Cam, is that the more I learned about mental health, the more I realized I didn't use that at all when I was in the military. And, in my toolkit as a leader, I would normally take corrective action. In other words, if I had somebody's performing great and all of a sudden he wasn't maybe performing where he needed to be, I took more corrective action rather than figuring out the source of it.
Hey, welcome to 10X Your Team with Cam and Otis. We're a father-son leadership podcast where we talk with other lifelong learners about making an impact and solving big problems. Dadgum, it was close. That was close. I thought I was going to mess that up.
Folks, stick around to the end to watch me mess up the outro.
Yeah. Well, it won't be as bad as the darts you messed up last night. Camden and I were over at the Holy Smokes having a cigar and a little whiskey and playing darts. And let's just say there's holes in the wall that weren't there before Camden started throwing darts.
I hit the board a few times, though. Got to hit it more than I missed, I think.
I will say that by the fourth game, when Etienne kicked both of our butts like redheaded stepchildren, you were throwing better. I think you beat me in that game.
I don't know about that.
I don't know. Our scores were so high, folks, that, I just stopped looking at the board. Thank goodness we were using an app on the phone to do the math because those were some big numbers, let's just say.
Well, yeah, and Etienne kept coming over. Camden, you need this, you need that. I can't hit anything I'm aiming for. I'm just throwing at the middle every time, and it goes where it goes.
Yeah. There was no adjusting the elevation and the windage on your scope for that shooting. But our good friend and fellow veteran, Army veteran, joining us, Mike Fleming. And hey, sir, did you ever play darts? Can you throw a dart?
I couldn't throw a dart. Growing up, we used to have something dangerous called, I notice you remember, lawn darts.
Oh yeah.
I mean, that was like, if you threw them, if it hit somebody, they might have killed them. But I remember lawn darts, but they banned them, I think, long ago. So that's the closest I come to throwing darts. Probably threw them at my brothers is what I did.
That's right, because you put your eye out, right?
Exactly.
Oh, man. Yeah, that just reminds me of we didn't have the lawn darts, so we started with just regular throwing darts. We'd throw them up in the air. And I'll never forget Camden's Uncle Ben when that dart came down and stuck in his back.
Oh, my gosh.
Were y'all playing like chicken with it? Like you throw it
up in the air? No, you just throw them up in the air and see where they land.
Hey, Cam, we didn't have all the entertainment you did. Okay, let's be clear. At our age, if we had darts, we thought we were the best thing in the neighborhood. Probably it drew everybody in the whole neighborhood if you had darts.
That's right. And damn, that's a hard transition to go from. I'm usually pretty good at a segue, but I just lost it on that thinking about the lawn darts. Mike, what I'd love to get into is this passion of continued service to the veteran tribe, which spoiler alert, which is what pulled you into the Cohen Institute. Could you tell us a little bit about how that's fulfilling your purpose?
Yeah, that's great. I appreciate being on here. Yeah, I had a real interesting career. I was in the military about 35 years. I actually started as a scared private at Parris Island many years ago, and then went through Parris Island. Obviously, in the Marines, survived that, and then went to OCS. So.
Survived it. That's
yes. Well, I always thought, when I approached it, because I've heard all about it, we all hear about basic training. I figured my drill instructor would figure out he didn't need to yell at me. I would do whatever he told me to do without yelling. But for about 3 months, he never figured that out. So did that, and then was an enlisted Marine for about 3 years, and then went to OCS, went to the enlisted commissioning program, and then was on active duty about 6 years. Was in the Marine Corps Reserve. And then after college, ended up changing to the Army, and so it was great. And I like the Army Navy game was recent, and I win and lose each one of those. So
Yeah.
I wish I could have just ended in a tie. But one of the things that I've found is I retired in 2010 and did some great things. And I worked manager director at Deutsche Bank. I worked at a Jacksonville University, senior vice president here in Florida. But then got engaged with the Cohen Veterans Network. They were interested in coming to Jacksonville, Florida. I'm a native of Jacksonville. My dad was a sailor at Mayport Naval Station in Jacksonville, and met my mom, and so I'm one of the few native Floridians. So got involved with really trying to get Cohen Veterans Network to put a clinic in Jacksonville, Florida. I do a lot of work in the veteran space here in Northeast Florida, across Florida. And then ended up, I laughingly say I was on the intern program with them because I was showing them around for about a year and then really kind of publicized it. So ended up working for the local clinic, and about 3 years ago started working the network level. And I get to help each one of our clinics go across the United States, connect with the communities. But what I really found, Otis and Cam, is that the more I learned about mental health, the more I realized I didn't use that at all when I was in the military. And, in my toolkit as a leader, I would normally take corrective action. In other words, if I had somebody's performing great and all of a sudden he wasn't maybe performing where he needed to be, I took more corrective action rather than figuring out the source of it. And that's a fault of mine as a leader. And the more I learned about mental health, I look back so many times where there was probably, either a Marine or soldier working for me that maybe he or she was having a problem, like at home or marriage or there was something in their family. And I never took that step to say, okay, Sergeant Smith, you're a high performer. What's going on? I would just look at the action and correct it. So I really felt like this has really become a passion for me. Actually, unfortunately, more about after I retired than when I retired, because, and y'all experience it all the time. We have veterans who maybe had a small problem while they were in the service, and had it been addressed from a mental health standpoint, may have even gone away, and or maybe much less in their lives. But because in the military we frankly didn't do a good job of looking at from the balancing physical health, mental health, and spiritual health, that it became a bigger problem. And then we're paying for it because these veterans are not having the lives that they'd hoped to have, maybe because they had something occur while they were serving in the military. So that's a long answer to a really kind of short question, but I really feel like, and you've experienced this, Otis, I mean, anything I achieved in the military was because somebody else had some faith in me and encouraged me to do things. If you'd told me, many, many years ago, I was a scared private at Parris Island that I'd be a general someday, I literally would have laughed. And just said, okay, I don't know who you are, but, that wouldn't happen. But, in the military, you just continue to build. It's almost like a stair step. If you do well in one place, you get another challenge and another challenge. And I'm very blessed that I still have the opportunity to be an advocate for the military, specifically in the mental health space. And that's really become my passion because, like I said, I really realized that I could have done a lot better as a leader, but now I can be someone who can provide support and make connections for leaders, both veterans and also active duty and National Guard and Reserve and their families.
I'm curious how you consider kind of zooming out and seeing the bigger picture on it when it comes to the performance, because I think with the crappy answer, frankly, that a lot of people would give to the same type of situations you're talking about is, well, we got a job to do. We got things that need to get done. I need the high performer to be a high performer. If I say, hey, take the week off, go spend some time with your family, get things straightened out, well, now I don't have them for a week. And there's that kind of scarcity mindset where a lot of leaders, and not great leaders, will not take care of their team like that. Could you talk some about how that, if you just zoom out that little bit more, kind of change your perspective on it, it actually does benefit not just the person in the long run, but also the organization?
Yeah, Cam, that's a great question. I use an example of my wife in my marriage. We've been married about 43 years. About a couple of weeks ago was our anniversary.
Congratulations.
when we started dating and then we got married, I was either the best guy that ever was born. I mean, I was the number one person, or I was probably the worst husband, the worst man that ever been. I mean, with my wife. I mean, I was here, and I can't even show you how low I was sometimes. And and so finally, I said, "Honey, look, can you do me a favor? Can you kind of grade me on a moving average? I'm not the best man ever, believe me. I know that. But on the other hand, I probably don't think I'm the worst man ever either. So I said, kind of look at me on a moving average that overall he's doing pretty well. Well, Cam, to answer your question, that's the way I approach leadership is that it's really a continuum. Because if you're a leader and you take someone's performance on one day and base everything on that, you may not be accurate. And then someone may have the best day they've ever had, but really not be that great a performer. Someone else may have the worst day because they had an argument with their spouse, right when they're going to work or something. So I kind of look at it as a moving average for that, in that, we're in this for the long term. Even if you're a leader and hey, look, I'm only doing this for a year, in the military particularly, soldiers, Marines, everybody I interacted with, they know if you're genuine or not. They know that. We had, I'd seen some of our junior officers when I was a general, and they would put their rank, the next rank, underneath their pocket on their BDUs. And I really, I understand part of it because you were saying, okay, I'm kind of, wanting to look ahead and trying to work toward that. But every soldier, every Marine I interacted with wanted to know at that moment I was engaged with him or her. I wasn't thinking, well, if I do well with you, I'm going to be something else. I'm going to get promoted or I'm going to get some other assignment. Because if you're not 100% focused on that particular day, then soldiers, Marines, military personnel will see right through you. Everybody can. I mean, that's the same way of the civilian world, but particularly the military, because everyone knows you can walk in a room and know who's the senior person. So everybody wants to achieve the next rank, which is all great. But the advice I would give these like officer candidates when I meet with them right before they get commissioned, I had one who was a candidate, had been a lieutenant. He asked me how you become a general. And it kind of took me aback, like, okay, you're looking 30 years in. I said, the first thing is be a good second lieutenant.
Yeah.
I said, you're not going to get anywhere if you're not good at what you're doing right now. So, Cam, your question is, I try to look at a moving average of people and then to see how I treat them. But I try to be invested in them. And I think that's one of the big things that we do with Cohen Veterans Network, where I work, is we're partners with the veterans and their families and help them get to, we call it back to better. Because what we want to be able to do is get them, each one of us defines what better is in our lives. And so we want to help them get them back to better. So, I really am fortunate to work for that. We can be an organization that can be supportive of the military community.
Mike, that's spot on, and I'm avoiding a rabbit hole, but I may pull us back to it later. Because what I'd love to talk about is you finding the path. Because one of the things that I do in my give back to the veteran tribe is I coach guys that are taking
Right.
the uniform off. I'd love for you to share that story of, because you had some pretty important roles in the civilian community after you took the uniform off. Deutsche Bank is that's no run of the mill sort of fly by night organization. But yet you transitioned into this full time giving back to the tribe. So could you talk a little bit about that transition and maybe share that gap that you felt also when you weren't doing the Cohen Institute?
Yeah. So very interesting. Like when I wear like a jacket, I've got a little cross here because people ask me if I'm a chaplain. And of course, believe me, I'm not a chaplain. But it reminds me of who I work for. So give all praise to Jesus and God for putting me into places, I needed to be. But what I found for the transition when I was going to get out, it was all about networking and people, because like the Deutsche Bank job, The Deutsche Bank job came about because there was a retired Navy captain named Skip Kramer, who I'd worked with while I was in the military with some veteran type of things. And he heard Deutsche Bank in Jacksonville was looking for somebody with military experience. And I remember when I sat down with John LaFond, who was the person from Deutsche Bank I was first interacting with, they started Deutsche Bank was starting something called Veterans on Wall Street, which is now ongoing. It's great. It really supports veterans. And I thought they were looking at me to actually, come in and help maybe run that. So I had put together a 4 or 5 page outline and everything. And so he said, that's great. He said, but what we really had in mind is, Mike, you running our Jacksonville site. And I tell him laughingly, when I fell off my chair, I came back and I said, well, I had some retail banking, but nothing like that. He said, look, what we want is somebody with leadership capability who understands the community. And I'm from Jacksonville. I said, and knows how to run large organizations. He said, we have experts who are going to help you on the banking side. And I said, yeah, sign me up. So I was fortunate with that. And then the next, when I moved from there to Jacksonville University to be a senior vice president, I'd gotten to know President Tim Cost, who was the president. And so he had a need. And so we ended up talking. I ended up working for him. So the first 2 jobs I had, I didn't apply for anything. It was simply because I knew people. And it's interesting. One of the things when I give speeches, the advice I give veterans is I think there's 3 categories they need to examine. And none of them are wrong, but you need to figure out the balance. Number 1, do you want to make as much money as you can? Number 2, do you want to live a particular place? Number 3, are you concerned about not working more than maybe 40 hours a week? And so all those, there's absolutely nothing right or wrong with any one of those 3. But rarely do you get all 3, that someone's going to pay you a large salary and tell you, I'm only going to work you 40 hours, exactly where you want to go, want to live. And so, if you get out of the military and you're 23 years old, you say, look, I want to make as much money as I can because I want to well, that's fantastic. Well, then you may have to live in, wherever. You may live in North Carolina and move to Wyoming or to California or something. So, to get that money. You may say, look, I love my hometown. Well, if you want to just stay there, that's great, but that's going to limit your possibilities. And then the other part is, as I said, is when I worked for Deutsche Bank, I didn't work 24/7, but there was an expectation. They compensated me well. And so they expected me to be available. And when we said there was a trip I needed to go on, they expected me to go on. So there's nothing that is right or wrong, but I think it's to set expectations. And then the other thing I always talk about is engage your family, because find out what your family thinks, what they would like to see. Because, the families, and y'all know this, and you've lived it personally, is the families serve also. And that's not just a trite saying, is you serve. You're, from an active duty standpoint, you move from place to place. If you're a National Guard or Reserve, then you're still serving. And then in my case, I served in the Florida Army National Guard. Quite often we had, hurricane duties or different kind of things, still had deployments, all of that. And so they were military families 24/7, the National Guard. So it's, when you get out, it's engage your family, find out what they think about it, where they would like to live, what their expectations are, and then try to balance the other aspects of it.
I'm curious because you don't strike me as the type of person that, even though these did just come from relationships and almost fell in your lap a little bit, like you're saying, you don't strike me as the type of person that was just the bag blowing in the wind. What was the kind of intention that led to those opportunities? Because you did through the network you find those opportunities, but also if you just had your head down the whole time, you weren't going to get that opportunity. What did that look like? How do you think the intention played into that role?
Yeah, initially, kind of what I didn't want to do, I didn't really want to be a contractor for the military. That was probably the one thing I didn't want to do because, this is going to sound critical, but there's sometimes when you do that, you end up going back and engaging people who used to work for you and trying to sell them on something, whatever you're doing. And I thought to myself, Lord, please don't make me do that because it happened to me. I had somebody when I was like a lieutenant colonel, he was a general. And then when I became a general, all of a sudden he came back. He was my best friend, because he wanted my support for something. So that was the one thing I really didn't want to do. But I really didn't know, Cam, what I wanted to do. I just wanted to have something that was interesting and challenging. And then in the back of my mind, kind of what Otis was talking about is I thought, okay, I feel like I've learned a couple of things. What can I do in the veteran community? And I didn't have any idea at that point what that meant, because I've been in the military. And so have that. So, but the neat thing is I was able to combine both a very interesting job. And I loved Deutsche Bank. That was great 4 years. I learned so much. But we started Veterans on Wall Street, which is an ongoing veteran service organization. Just doing it's really expanded well beyond anything we originally started. We started with 5 financial institutions, and now it's really just gone outside. Veterans on Wall Street obviously talks about financial services, but it's gone well beyond that, which is fantastic. And then one of the other things that allowed me to do, I created something called the Jacksonville Military Veterans Coalition, because I wanted to do something about employment for veterans in Jacksonville, Florida, which is my hometown. So I looked around, and you guys know this. If you put in veterans and jobs, you get 1 billion hits, but they're not oriented toward one particular area. So I wanted to create an organization, didn't even know what it looked like. So we started the Jacksonville Military Veterans Coalition back in 2012. Now we have about 550 companies that are part of that. We want to have veteran employment. The city of Jacksonville is the partner. They maintain the website. We have quarterly meetings. So, it gave me an opportunity to really, just kind of put my foot in the, toe in the water just to see. And then it's led to so many things because as both of you know, just how we met, Otis, we met because you ended up meeting Michelle McManaman with Operation Uniform, who said, "Hey, Mike, you got to meet this guy, Otis." And then after you and I talked, then I told Amy Moore, who's our Colorado Springs clinic director, "You got to meet Otis." And so that's the way it works in the veteran community. So, I really felt like I wanted to be challenged, and I've been fortunate. Every job I've had has been phenomenal, and it's allowed me. Each one of them have allowed me to continue and work for the veterans in different ways, and I'm very blessed with that.
Let's talk about that attitude of service. I always make fun of people that say service leadership, because if you ain't serving, you ain't leading. But how do you explain that? How would you, Lieutenant Fleming or Private Fleming, go back and say, "Hey,
I've been both of those.
Yeah, here's how you do it."
I think it came back to the kind of the attitude of kind of the rolling average and things. And then I remember I used to tell my son that I hope when you see me, I exhibit traits that are good and you can follow. I said, but also I'm going to screw up. That's the one thing I can guarantee you. I'm going to screw up. I'm going to do something wrong. I mean, not like, fortunately, not criminally wrong, but just maybe didn't handle it the right way. And I said, you need to observe me when I do that so you don't do that. And that's where I was fortunate. And I think it's one of the great things. I mean, I didn't plan it, but the fact that I was an enlisted Marine really has set me to be a better officer, simply because, I was an E1. I had nothing on my sleeves. I got nothing. I mean, E1 and just, slick sleeve and all that. And, I knew as I, moved up, and I was fortunate in the Marine Corps, very proud. I had 3 meritorious promotions, made sergeant and E5 sergeant in, I think 20 months. So I moved quickly with that, but it gave me, I was an enlisted Marine and really observed around, and I knew what it meant when one of the officers came up and told me something. I mean, I can't remember talking to a general, but, as I moved up, I knew the impact of that, of what it meant. And so I tried to do that and think, okay, when I do something, how's that going to affect the last man in the last rank, when I say something? And as I got more senior, my wife would laugh about this. I'd say things, I think, pretty prophetic in a positive way as a lieutenant. Nobody listened to me. But I got more senior in rank. All of a sudden, I said the same thing, and people actually listened. So frankly, I had to get used to that. And so, that's look at it is that you're blessed to be a servant leader. You're blessed to be in that position, and you're in that position not to make yourself look good, but to get your soldiers or your Marines to be productive. Because one thing that's been interesting to me, one of the differences I've seen in the civilian world and the military, if you're in a leadership position, you're in command of something. When you take that command, you normally are very complimentary of whoever was the previous person. And you're going to say, Otis was great. He did fantastic. I'm going to build on what he's done. And then when you leave, hopefully the person says that, and you actually want your unit to be better when you leave. Not because you left, but because of what you built was so strong. It wasn't just built on you, that it was, it was a team effort, and the person that replaced you built on that, and everything. It's like a house. You just continue to build that. And what I've seen in the civilian world, unfortunately, quite often is people feel like they just got to run down whoever their predecessor was so they can look good and like, oh, okay, Fleming was all screwed up and I got to fix everything he did, rather than said, Fleming did the best he could. He did a great job. I'm going to build on that. So that's something I've really come to appreciate in the military, that what we do is we build on what other people have done and give them credit for it. Mm-hmm. Because as we talked about, every unit that I commanded, actually my battalion didn't exist. So I was actually the first battalion commander, but most of the time you're building on things, and it's a heritage, and you embrace that heritage, that you're part of that particular unit. And so I think it's, for leadership, it's really, Cam, you really hit it. It's really taking a long view that, every day is important. But if you maybe don't accomplish everything, that one day, we can live with that. Don't lose it. And then the other part I learned in leadership is showing up, is being there. And then, this, Otis, if your troops are working in the motor pool till 7:00 in the evening, you walk around and talk to them. I couldn't turn a wrench to save my life, so I didn't want to hurt anybody. But they know, hey, the lieutenant's here. Yeah. He's in his office doing something, but we're here till 7. The lieutenant's here. And those are kind of things I think that are very, very important as from a leadership standpoint, because to me, the biggest challenge being a leader is how you manage your time. Because that's the one thing, I don't care, you've heard work harder and smarter. All that may be true, but you only have a limited amount of time. And you have to balance it between your job and your family. And so, that's one of the biggest challenges as you get more senior leadership, is how do I manage my time?
Yeah, yeah. Did you have a model, a leader model, like that guy, man, I love the way he did X or something? I would say mentor, but I know you were in the Army and we never had mentors. The Army fails in that category. However, we do have people we looked up to. Who was your guy?
Well, I'd say the longer term would have been my dad. He always, worked very hard, and we had an odd saying within my dad, my brothers, and we would say it's your own stank, which meant it's your own fault. Mm-hmm. It said, don't go making excuses that something happened when you're the one, you're responsible for it. And my brothers and my dad, unfortunately, has passed many years ago, but our brothers will occasionally say, that's your own stank. I mean, and it's really to indicate, hey, you're responsible for that. So I think that's one of the big things I got from my family is, taking personal responsibility. And then, I had fortunate, a lot of great people. Brigadier General Richard Capps was the person who, my transition, he approved me coming from the Marine Corps to the Army. And he was a lieutenant colonel at the time. And he has informally mentored me over the years and kind of given me advice and things. And I could name any number of people who've done that. But a lot of it is, just investing and listening and showing up. So, I try to watch other people and say, okay, if I was in that position, what would I have done, or what would I do? And then try to model them when I, got promoted. And, the interesting thing, like I said, never expect to be a general, but they send you to, it's called General Officer Orientation Course. It's called Charm School too, right? And I'm certainly not charming. That didn't work. But
You got a C minus in that category.
The charm ain't working. But one of the interesting things is they basically said at this school, hey, you've had your last bad day as general. No one wants to hear a general complain. I mean, if you want to talk to your wife or your, other generals, that's fine. But troops don't want to hear it because they think if you're fortunate enough to be a general, you got no problems. Now, we all know that's not true because we're all human. But it took a different mindset for that. And then I think the other thing, and Otis, you probably went through it when each time you get promoted in the military, it's really just completely different the way you're viewed. Mm-hmm. And I mean, it's in a good way because there's more expectations of you and you've got to adopt that role of the way you conduct yourself. I mean, there's 1,000, probably millions of second lieutenant jokes, right? But so you just have to almost survive as a second lieutenant. Now, I was fortunate in the Marine Corps because I'd been an enlisted Marine. My troops actually thought, okay, he probably knows, a year ago he was one of us. So that was okay. But, each time you do that, and I found that in the civilian world also it's important that, you carry yourself as a veteran because a lot of people, unfortunately, what is it? Maybe 8 or 9% of the people in the United States have ever served in the military. So many people don't really have that many veteran friends. And so, when they meet you, and particularly I found that being a retired general officer, people just look at you differently. It was funny. My mother looked at me differently. It was hilarious. I mean, obviously I was a full colonel before I got promoted to 1-star. And my mom, I think, was proud of it, but she went out of her mind when I became a general, and she would go up to people and ask them if she knew me, just so she could tell them her son was a general. So, but it's interesting because the general public, no pun intended, looks at flag officers differently. Mm. I mean, they really do. Not some. I don't seek it, and I don't start with my military rank. But when they find out, they look at you differently. So my expectation of who I am and the way I interact in the public still is driven by the fact that I have the honor of being a flag officer. And I use the term, I'm a forever general. Not that I carry that or wear it, but the public, when they hear you're a general, there's a certain expectation of who you are and what you bring to the table and the way that you conduct yourself. So, in the same way, Otis, you and Cam, you have taken, tribe plus purpose, and then you've gotten into areas probably you never thought you'd get into. Because, you went A, B, C, and then you went to F, and then you went to Z, and you went back to G, and, you went places. And so that's one of the things that you guys I know have experienced, and I've experienced, is you never know where it's going to take you. But you have to be open to those opportunities because you may be the only person who can do this for the veteran community and take advantage of that.
Well, you nailed it on that alphabet. We're a big old alphabet soup going on here at Tribe and Purpose. I can tell you that.
and that's just like at the beginning of with the darts, right? Yep. Where that was going to go.
I'm really curious on your perspective because I think it's really true what you're saying. You had your last bad day. People don't want to hear about it. Those kind of things. Taking personal responsibility is so important, but there's a negative side to that. I think, especially when we're talking in the mental health space, which is this is my responsibility can very quickly become this is all my fault. What is your thought on how to prevent that? Because you can't get rid of the personal responsibility. That's right. A crappy answer, right? So it's like, how do you balance those two without going off the deep end?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, from my view, I think you have to be open with who you are and the fact that you're not perfect. I've had individual counseling. I've had marriage counseling. I mean, I think that was one of the reasons I've been married 43 years is because we've had marriage counseling. So I think there's a certain vulnerability that you owe people, even in the military, is, if you act like some super soldier or super marine or super leader who never screws up, then I don't think people really can relate to you. And you need to, there's a certain, unfortunately, not unfortunately, or structure, there's a distance when you have ranks. It's just the way it is. But that doesn't keep you from knowing that it's, somebody's wife's name, or it's somebody's birthday, or it's their anniversary, or something like that. One of the things I did when I was a battalion commander is I asked my company commanders each month to send me 5 soldiers from their company who did something right. And then I wrote them a note about, hey, Sergeant Smith, heard you did great on this inspection. Just want to say thank you and I appreciate all the great work that you're doing. And so that really, I think, personalized it because it told Sergeant Smith 2 things. One, his battalion commander knew about it, but he also knew that, hey, Colonel Fleming wasn't here this weekend or didn't know me. Somebody else in my company thought I was valuable and gave my name to him. So, those are the kind of things I think are important. And I never think we had a JRTC rotation at Fort Polk. And I was walking through our battalion area, and I was walking, a soldier just called me and started talking to him. He goes in his BDU pocket and pulls out the note that I had sent him. And he said, "Sir, I carry this around with me all the time to remind me that somebody thought I was valuable. And you could have knocked me over with a feather." I figured that someone, I'm sure I figured they appreciate it because I appreciate it when I gotten like a star note or something like that. But it reminded me to have that personal touch. And Cam, getting back to you, it's part of how can you be connected to them? What can you do to say, hey, you are very valuable? And then I use the military example, but that's the same thing, with any leadership role, civilian, education, wherever you are. If you can know something about the people working for you and get engaged with them, then they're going to respond to you because they know your intent is try to do what's best for them. You obviously have to move whatever the mission is of the organization forward, but how can you be engaged with that? And then, the sooner you can establish that I'm in this leadership role to make everybody better rather than I'm in this leadership role so I can walk all over you guys and look good, and then I'll get moved up. And so to me, that's the biggest challenge for leaders is establishing that kind of rapport with people that work for them.
There's something I want to go back to on a communication piece, which actually we had not last night, another cigar,
another
cigar night when we were talking about this a little bit because I think it's a big problem and it's frustrating because it is just a communication problem. It's just a really simple problem at the end of the day. But you're talking about the importance of not trashing the person before you, right? When you take the new role, it is, hey, Otis did his great job. Here's what I'm going to do, right? Future casting what you're going to do, but not putting the person down. Right. What are your thoughts on how to communicate a mixed bag of results? And what I mean by that is when there is something that's really freaking bad and you need to address that, but there's also good things. I think that's one of those where a lot of the times we kind of choose the crappy answer and we, go back to, all right, well, no, everything's great. It's like, no, it's not great. There's bad things. There's good things.
Right.
That's hard to communicate. But it is at the end of the day, a very simple thing. What are your thoughts on how to communicate that mixed bag of results and still successfully future cast on it, not getting so caught up in the bad things that have happened, the things that somebody did wrong, whatever it was, and instead saying, hey, that is real, but we can still move forward with it.
Yeah, unless somebody was fired for cause, I think you can normally, I'm talking about both the civilian world and if somebody gets fired, military or civilian world for, some criminal or something terrible, nobody expects you to gloss over that, Cam, like you were talking about. No, that's part of it. But by and large, people don't come to work to try to screw everything up. They do the best they can. So even if you're taking over from somebody you consider kind of mediocre, I think you can always find something positive about that because somebody looked, we all have our biases and we all have our areas of emphasis when we're in charge of something and we want to make this area good. Normally you can find that area and say, Cam, I would say Cam's all screwed up as a leader, but he did these things right. Actually wouldn't say that, but you would say,
I've said it.
You say something. Look, I appreciate all the work Cam did with family programs. That really was, he really made a significant difference with that, and I really want to build on that. You can select a particular area, and maybe all the other things weren't as great, but you can do that because I don't. I've done 1,000. Well, I can't even tell you the times I've screwed up in my life. I mean, countless times.
Should we call your wife?
Well, she would verify that. If you would like
what our wives would tell you.
If you would like numbers and examples, she could do it. But what I found in my life is that what good does it do to run somebody else down? I mean, it really doesn't. I mean, if you get asked a factual question in whatever your role is, you need to give a factual answer. If someone's not a performer or something like that. But by and large, you're not asked that question all that often, where it's really a personnel decision. It's find something positive, and it sounds so corny to do that, but what it does, it preserves relationships and things because you never know where you're going to run into somebody later on down the line or things like that. And particularly, I mean, I don't do social media. I mean, I think I got a Facebook page, but my wife, I think, has gone on there and put pictures. I don't, go on X. I don't do any of that. Number one, I can't even spell IT. But on the other hand, I don't really think me commenting on everything is, I talk to my wife, talk to friends about it, but it doesn't do much good to do that because you may be alienating somebody you need to work with. And, in the veteran community, there are all kind of political views. And so you can't make an assumption that if you put something out that's very controversial, then, everybody, you maybe alienate somebody. And I'm not saying you shouldn't. I mean, I have personal views from a Christian standpoint that maybe are at odds with other people, and I'm glad to share those, but I don't lead with those. If it's not appropriate, I don't put my personal life in there. So I think, when you're working with people, if you're taking over from them or working with them, normally you can find some positives about what they've done and then, work from that and then kind of leave that behind and look forward.
And one thing I'd add to that too is I think, and whether it's, actually true in some karmic sense or, there's just a mental thing that happens, but I think that also when you put people down like that, it's that muscle gets really good. And then that's how you beat yourself up too.
Oh,
if
absolutely.
I'm out there looking at how terrible everyone else is, that same muscle, I'm going to use it on myself. And I think that's a really big piece of that too.
Yep. I always think about like for basketball. Now I'm like about 5'9", so I was never going to be a center. So my role was always get the ball to the guys that. So I took more joy actually in getting an assist to somebody than actually making a basket myself. And I kind of take that attitude now. How can I help somebody else look better, to do that? Because like I said, I've been so blessed. I obviously got to be a general officer. I got to be a managing director at a international bank. Got to be a senior vice president. I got elected to the Florida Veterans Hall of Fame. I mean, I've been so blessed with so many things. So I really feel like my role right now is how can I build other people up? How can I take my expertise and help get to a situation and everybody looks great at the end of that day. So, I'm very fortunate with, Cohen Veterans Network. We provide the outpatient mental health care to active duty, National Guard and Reserve, post 9/11 veterans and military families. And, I have the opportunity to work with the clinics across the United States. We have 20 that are in the United States right now. We're about to open one in January 2026, Manhattan, Kansas, just out of Fort Riley. And then, Otis, we may have talked about it the other day a little bit, but we just announced this week that we're actually going to be going to South Korea and Japan and opening up clinics there for the military families there. So, I get the chance to be part of a lot of things. Now, I don't need to be in charge of any of it. But what I can do is add my particular view or my experience to try to make that better. And so that's kind of my view. I've taken hopefully I've done that throughout my life, but particularly now is, how can I take my experience and help make other things better? And I'm very fortunate with the Cohen Veterans Network. I get to work with our soon to be 23 clinics here in the United States. And then the 2 clinics over in, actually we'll end up, I think, with 5 clinics, which means South Korea and Japan. how can I take my experience and help make those areas better?
Let's talk about that, because I'm curious if where how we can get to the root cause, and if the Cohen the Veteran Network has a vision to get to the root cause. And what I mean by is getting that education into the active duty service. It's a veteran network, but what are you,
Right.
if you're doing something to get to the root cause? I mean, to that lieutenant, that private.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. You know, we obviously there's some places where you actually give classes to kind of awareness on mental health awareness and the challenges faced. And sometimes we go to like a company commander first sergeant course or something like that, where they're about either to be a company commander or first sergeant for a unit and do that. So part of this is a education standpoint. From the military standpoint, I think the military is doing a better job. Obviously, anything can be improved, but looking at that, so part of what I do is, as a retired flag officer, is to talk about my experience, that I've had marriage counseling, that I've had individual counseling, that it's okay, and it's for that. So I think that's one of the great things about the Cohen Veterans Network. It gives me a platform to talk about that, but it also gives us a way that I can give back by our clinics, because like I said, we have the 23 clinics. We have 2 clinics in Asia, soon, to be 5. And so part of this is also helping, how can we get the message out? Because what y'all just talked about, it breaks my heart sometimes. I probably know more about veteran service organizations, like particularly here in Florida, than I'll ever need, fortunately. But how do we get that, the old thing, how do I get the message to the last man in the last rank? And, all these programs that we have are useless if the people who need them don't know about them. And so that's where the education standpoint, Otis, you were just talking about, is so important. And we make connections with the, our active duty counterparts, the mental health facilities. We try to get with the family readiness programs. You're familiar with Army Community Services, the ACS, and the other organizations have that. So it's really, the answer is everything we try to talk to. We try to talk to anybody we can to get the message out to that, because you never know, that person may not need it, but hopefully that leader kind of puts it in his toolkit. And then when he says, this guy, my Sergeant Smith has been a high performer, all of a sudden he's not showing up, he's missing time. You bring him in, so okay, tell me what's going on. Not start off yelling, just start off, give a just a broad answer. It's interesting. I'll give you one quick example. I learned as a second lieutenant. I was the XO of a company in the Marine Corps, which what, Otis, you're the hammer, right? Company commander is a good guy. You're the XO, you're the hammer. So I had on every Monday morning, when someone done something stupid over the weekend, I had kind of office hours. And so I'd bring Marines in and they'd do things. And so one Marine had come in previous Friday evening, and basically thrown up all over the barracks there. So I brought him in, and I was about to, just give him whatever the normal punishment was. And I said, well, tell me what happened. He said, well, sir, I went out to this bar, and he said, for the first time in my life, when I asked a girl to dance, she said yes. And I was like, that almost blew me away. That blew me away. You could have knocked me over with a feather. And I said, get out of here. You're fine then. I mean, I did no punishment for that. Because because if I was only looking at the action, he obviously got too much to drink, and he came back and he, made a mess of the barracks. But at least I took the time to ask him about it. And I'm, all of us grew up in high school, dances and stuff. So, I had girls dancing with, so really, I never even thought about that. But for him, he had never in his life actually asked a girl to dance who'd said yes. So he celebrated that. With that. So it taught me, always ask that first question, why, rather than just taking corrective action based on what your, assumption is.
I would love to hear your thoughts on the phrase that comes to mind is like the state of the union. But this is a big problem that I think people have been talking about for a very long time when it comes to mental health for veterans
Yeah,
and active duty, like you
absolutely.
said. Where do you think we're at with this? Is there progress being made? Obviously, there's a lot more to be done, but give us kind of that view of, where are we at in terms of solving the problem?
Yeah, Cam, that's a great question. I think that it's becoming, because we're talking about it, it's getting better because hopefully it's becoming more acceptable to do that. Frankly, there's still a stigma. We've had Paul Wood is who I work with, the Cohen Veterans Network. He and I do focus groups, and unfortunately, there's still a stigma. We were out at Oceanside, and there was a spouse of a Marine Lieutenant Colonel. She said, "I'm so glad when my husband retires in 2 months, he can be himself
Hmm.
rather than who the Marine Corps thinks he should be." And so I think that, unfortunately, that's always going to be a stigma because, and Otis has, I've been at both, when I went through Marine boot camp, I went to Paris Island and went to Quantico for OCS. They tear you down to bring you back up. And you're the lowest, on earth. But then at the end of it, you're the biggest, baddest, soldier, airman, whatever you are. And so, where do you get, then you say, okay, well, if I'm the biggest and baddest Marine or airman or whatever, why am I thinking? Why am I depressed? Why am I not where I need to be? And so that's just kind of awareness about that. And I think the other aspect of this is we need to do a better job telling the general public how they can be supportive, because 9 out of 10 people I meet normally are not veterans, but by and large they want to be supportive. So how can we do things to educate the public? I chair something called the Fire Watch, and we have something called a Watchstander program. And our theory is we say we want to engage the 90%,
Mm-hmm.
and by showing them what they can do. And so we work with PsychArmor. We have about an hour of training, but it makes people try to make them comfortable when they're talking to their veteran friend that say, "Hey, Mike, we played golf now for 5 years every Saturday morning for 5 years. All of a sudden, you don't want to do that anymore. You just want to sit around your house. What's going on?" Because I want to be treated by my friends as just as a friend, not the fact that I happen to have been in the military and you can't talk to me even though you were never in the military. So I think one of the biggest things that we can do is engage the 90% and get them involved, because the scourge of veteran suicide, if we could have solved that by just having veterans support other veterans, we'd already done it. I mean, all of us veterans want to help. There aren't enough of us because we don't interact on a day-to-day basis. And so that's why we want to engage the 90%. So I think overall, the State of the Union is better. And then, like we have the VA, I'm here in North Florida, South Georgia. I think the world of the VA and the leadership, they do great. And then we have Cohen Veterans Network. We have other organizations. And that's one of the neat things I get to do. I get to work with our Cohen Veterans Network national partners and see all the different things that they're doing, and then try to get everything connected. So, like with Cohen Veterans Network, we provide outstanding mental health, outpatient mental health, but we don't have a food bank. We don't have a place for a homeless veteran to live, but we have partners that do. But then these partners don't have to provide mental health services because we do. And that's one of the neat things I found in the veteran service ecosystem. And Otis, I think this is part of where we're, trained in the Marine Corps, at least. When you go to Paris Island, you're not allowed to say the word I. You start saying the private, because you want to get a mindset. You are part of the organization. This is no longer individual. And I think that's, to me, one of the neat things about being part of the veterans ecosystem is that by and large, organizations say, look, we do this great. We need you to be great at what you do. And then that way we can do better. So I think the more we can have the intersection in this ecosystem, people talking, I think the better we're all going to be.
Oh yeah, the ecosystem is it. I mean, it's the old adage of no one gets there alone, and that goes with that ecosystem. And I think one of the things that we have to do is the continuous education
Absolutely.
of the men and women that are serving, so they know what's out there, and then the men and women who have served and need some service. It's we have to continue to do a better job. We've improved in that world, and I think there's still a lot of room to grow. And that whole thought of how do you grow and learn just reminds me. You said something. So I've always said when I preach about leaders, one of your roles is to understand the second and third and fourth order effects.
Mm-hmm.
But I love the way that you put it, in the fact that how does this affect the last man in the last rank?
Right.
That is so. I can put my hands around it, because the other way is kind of the big hand, little map. So I'm gonna steal that.
I like it.
I don't know if I'll remember that you said it, but I'm going to steal it.
I'm sure I stole it from somebody else myself. So
yeah,
Yes, sir.
I'm not smart enough to think that originally. So somebody said that many years ago, and I just stole it from them.
That's awesome. Kim, what'd you learn?
I think it was something you said towards the beginning, talking about trying to, get people back to better. I think that's such a good way of putting it. And, words mean things, like you always say, Dad. And I think we have to be intentional about the way we talk about stuff. We've talked about on the show before the idea of like, well, how often should you ask yourself if you're happy? Because if you're asking yourself 5 times a day, you're going to realize you're not happy 5 times a day, and you're going to start looking at the negative, right? And I think these things are so hard to measure, so hard to wrap our heads around. And so something just as simple as that, of just back to better. And what is better? Just maybe it's the 1%, and that's it. And just recognizing that, I think, is such a better way to frame the mental health landscape, rather than, am I happy today? Am I 100% better? Am I back all the way, or back to my old self, or whatever that is? Those things are so hard to measure. And just thinking about that 1% improvement, or ideally maybe a 2-3% improvement, whatever it is, but trying to get just that little bit better, I think is such a better way of looking at it.
I'm laughing because we were on a show the other day, and I must have used better about 50 times in a small paragraph answer. And yeah, it must be hereditary. Yes, Mike, sir. How about you, man? What'd you learn?
Well, I learned how bad both of you are at darts, and so I don't think that But then you and Otis, talked about lawn darts. Cam had kind of a blank look on his face, because they were outlawed, should have been outlawed beforehand. But the other part probably learned is it just reinforced what we talk about, is take every opportunity to talk about what we can do for veterans. Because I appreciate the fact that you guys do the podcast, right? And you're actively seeking new places, new people to come on. You ended up talking to Michelle McManaman, which led here. You talked to Amy Moore. Hopefully, maybe have Amy come on, because the beauty of what Amy can do, Amy can really, as a clinician, talk about really much more in detail. I laughingly say, with Cohen Veterans Network, I talk about the network and I write all the checks, but the clinicians cash the checks, right? Because you don't want me to be a clinician. I'd be terrible. And so, but I can go out and talk in the broadest sense. So what I learned is, I just need to keep doing and looking for opportunities to spread the word, not only for what, in our case, what Cohen Veterans Network does, but how do we take that opportunity to highlight other organizations that are doing great things that veterans need, and then look at it as an ecosystem. We're all in this together.
Awesome. Mike, how do folks find you, connect with you, learn more about the Cohen Veteran Network also?
Yeah, it's Cohen Veterans Network, CohenVeteransNetwork.org. Spell out Cohen, Cohen, and veteransnetwork.org. Be happy to have people contact me directly. It's michael.fleming@CohenVeteransNetwork.org. As I said before, I'm not on LinkedIn. I'm not on anything. So the best way is through my email. And love to talk about that. And then all the different places, the expansion that we have has been phenomenal. But it's if you got a question about our network, or just any kind of question, I would happy to engage, because I love getting just got a random email. I heard you one time talk something, and I'd like to contact you. That's fantastic, and can make any connections. And then others, when you two are ever down here in Florida, you got to come when it's you can come when it's warm, and yes. We'll get you out with some seafood there at all kind of different places here.
Yeah, we don't get don't get good seafood here in Colorado. I don't care what anybody says. We're too far away from the ocean. So
That's exactly right.
I'll be taking you up on that one. Mike, it has been a pleasure and an honor for you to spend some time with us. Thank you.
That was my pleasure. I really enjoyed it. And thanks so much for what the two of you are doing. You make it very easy, but also we talk about the advocacy. What you're doing gets the word out in so many different ways, and I appreciate it.
Awesome. Cam, run us out.
All right. Thank y'all for listening to today's episode of 10X Your Team with Cam and Otis. And a special thanks to our guest today, Mike Fleming, for joining us. You can check out a full archive of our episodes at www.10xyourteam.net. And you can check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Thanks again for watching. We'll see y'all next time.